Well, after 1 week, normal service resumed for Oxford United. Welcome back to Walking the London Road as Oxford United fall to a 1-0 loss to Chris Wilder's Sheffield United to give the Blades their first point of the season. Conor and I are going to be breaking down that game. If there's any Sheffield United fans that are watching this, I'm sure you're going to get some enjoyment out of this. But regardless of whether you're a Sheffield United or an Oxford United fan, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Of course, you can listen to us on both YouTube and Spotify. It really helps us out in the algorithm. Conor, I know you weren't at the game over the weekend. How did you put your time up to better use than watching Oxford?
I was actually looking at my new flat, so that was one thing that didn't get me depressed this weekend. I feel very sorry for you, Sam, but fair play, fair play, sticking through the full 90 minutes.
Well, massive congratulations on that, mate. It's the only congratulations we're going to get in this episode, so we might as well sink it in while we can. I think. I'm trying to think of a way to put this off as long as possible, but I don't think we can. Right, let's obviously start by looking at the lineup that Gary Rowett deployed. It was an unchanged 11 from the side that, of course, beat Bristol City by 3-1 at Ashton Gate. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Conor, this is the first unchanged 11 we've had all campaign.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. If I'm quickly running through my head, so that seems correct. I think that I'm sure we'll get onto it, but I don't think anybody really, after how we performed against Bristol City, would be comfortable in changing it. So I don't think there were too many complaints just through taking a quick look through socials.
My only, again, it's something we've kind of been on all season at this point already, is Sheffield United starting on the right hand side, as we saw yet again. Man's got no right foot, so Rowett's persistence in playing him there does cause issues for us. But overall, you're right in terms of not a lot of justice has been done to any of those players in changing them after the performance last weekend. Obviously, we're starting to get a few more defensive reinforcements. Ben Davies back on the bench. He is. I think he will be fit to start against either QPR or Watford. After this game, would you be inclined to bring Ben Davies straight back in, or do you think that Hellick and Long have got to continue?
I think I'd be more inclined to bring Ben Davies in. I think that Sam Long, he knows his role, and I think that Rowett trusts him in being able to step up. And I also think that Sam Long, as much as he'd like to be starting, I think that he knows and he's comfortable within his own skin that that's the bit part player that he's going to be. And I think from a fan's perspective, if we're honest, we don't want Sam Long to be in that position where there is potential, as much as he's stepped up, for him to be a source of ridicule, because every time that he's had a bit of ridicule, he's overcome it. But I don't think that long term in that position, that's where he'll be. I do think that there'll be more times this season, maybe if he goes out onto the right hand side, which is what his natural position, I believe. Otherwise, like with Davis coming in, you wonder if Davis isn't going to be in there straight away. What was really the point in him bringing him in? I know that we needed centre half cover at the time, but I think when you look pound for pound, and I don't think it's too much of a controversial thing to say, pound for pound at a left centre half position, Ben Davis, when he's fully fit, will be starting over Sam Long in left centre half when the both are fully fit.
Mm-hmm. Some positive news on the centre half front as well. One of my mates was chatting to Kieran Brown as he walked into the Castad yesterday, and Kieran said that barring any setbacks, he should be ready to go after the international break, which is very, very good. His words were, "I'll be back in a week or so," but obviously next week we've got the international break, so it'll be the Derby game will be the first game Kieran would likely be able to feature in. But I'm guessing that Rowett will favour to maybe give Kieran maybe 15, 20 minutes, just to kind of bed him back in. Of course, first minutes of the campaign, so that'll be, we don't want to rush arguably our best centre back in straight away and risk potentially another injury.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either if there's some sort of behind closed doors friendly that's been organised during the international break, or if Brown even goes into an under 23, under 21 squad and stick him in there for, as you say, for half an hour or so, just to get him some minutes in the legs would be really beneficial.
Yeah, very good shout. Right, that's the lineup. Right, let's I want to, if we can get a side counter. Yeah, are we all done? I wonder if we can get a side counter, see how many times I do that through the course of this episode. Right. What we're going to do, viewers, is we're going to, as we've done with previous games, we're going to break it down into halves because, as Conor and I mentioned before we began rolling, this is the dictionary definition of a game of two halves. So, these are the stats for the overall 90 minutes, and it's very much, I mean, it's a telltale Chris Wilder. Shithouse his way to a 1-0 win, isn't it? We saw a fair few of these in his time at, in OX4, Conor. But I think the more telling is if we look at the momentum chart, because this, as you can see, large chunks of this game where we are the better side. A lot of creativity going on, but a serious lack of end product. And again, we'll go into a little bit deeper in a moment or two, but we're getting into those areas, but no one's willing to take the shot on goal.
Yeah, when you look at it, especially in the first half, it's so dominant from Oxford. Like Sheffield United had those brief moments in play and in possession. They had a couple opportunities, like in the first half, you see that one in near enough from the and there's penalty spot and the centre spot. Tyrese Campbell, he had a massive opportunity, which is I expect why, although the XG is pretty low, why XG is around 0.15, and it would have been a lot smaller otherwise. But when looking at this first half, it was just complete and utter domination, and we should be putting at least one, if not two, away. And what is a little bit concerning is the amount of shots that we seem to be taking outside of the box. I'm using my finger here, so I can. The amount that's being taken outside the box, and very little that was being converted into anything. And the amount of chances that we had as well. I think before Kurzmacher, he had his shot. Krastev, he had an opportunity to, leather it through his right foot. If it was nice, hard and low, more likely would have been difficult to deal with. But in the first half, the only shot that we had came from a centre forward, came from Will Lancashire. I guess if you count Prelec, there's two, but he was playing in the 10. Nothing that we had was coming. There was, as you say, there was no end product coming in from our centre forwards. And this is even more frustrating because at the start of the season and towards the back end of last season, we had the problem of being able to create nothing, whereas now we seem to be getting into areas where we can create something. That's become even more infuriating, that we know we can see what Lancashire can do, but all of his goals in one way or another have not necessarily come from open play. Like, you can argue that the one that he got against Leicester was from open play, but it was on a plate. He should be putting that in the back of the net. So essentially, we need to start scoring goals. We need to find a way to score goals and convert these opportunities into chances. Because also, sorry, I'm going on a bit of a rant. Because also defensively, you could say that we were proper and we were stifling, limiting Sheffield United to very, very few opportunities, and they had a few which they should have taken. I'm sure that they'll know themselves. But also in the centre of midfield, the aggression that we showed in the first half, every time we lost the ball, it probably took no longer than 30 seconds to, win the ball back in possession. It was heavy. It was in their faces. We looked like that we wanted to get at them. It was exactly what we said in last week's pod, Sam, that we wanted to do straight from the off. Get at them, get going, and really dominate the game. And that's what we did in the first half. And it was just so frustrating that we couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. And everyone going into the concourse at halftime said, if we get one goal, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 because Sheffield United will have to come out. And this fit right into their game plan, as I'm sure that we're going to get into, that they held back, and then they looked for the opportunity where we seem to be trying to recapture our breath, regroup, and then they go and do what Chris Wilder does. And as we said before, which we all knew, and which was the reason why all these years ago why he ended up leaving shithouse football. And this is, excuse my French, and this is exactly what happened.
Yeah. And there were periods during that that first half that I and a lot of people around me were we were literally stood there like, eyes, wide, like, what are we watching? Because there was some beautiful football being played. Some really intricate moves. Krastev looking sensational. Brian de Kurzmacher, like we talked about last week, looking a step above everybody else. There was also hints of, this is going to sound crazy, but it's the only kind of example that pops to mind. It was like total football because you had Brian de Kersmacher stepping in at right back, Krastev doing his defensive duties, Will Lancashire coming deep and contributing, Mikhail Helik obviously getting involved further forwards. We were playing some really good football, but again, it's the lack of end products. And again, if we look at the shot map, only 3 shots on target. An awful lot of these efforts were blocked by Sheffield United bodies. And you mentioned Will Lancashire. I'll say a massive amount of credit to Ben Mee and Hafid Tanganga because they marked Will Lancashire out of the game. Lancashire was really struggling. He was playing with his back to goal so often because the experienced head that Ben Mee is. He knew how to make a young striker, how to put a young striker off of his game. And like you say, it's just so infuriating because I think in terms of from a pure football perspective, that's our best performance of the campaign, especially in that first half. Just based on the football we're playing, the way we were moving the ball, like we said, they're not always a great tell, but stats don't often lie. And as you can see, the first half we were much the better side, and Sheffield United they didn't look great. Obviously, we'll get into that second half. They, obviously got a rocket up their backsides from Chris Wilder, and like I said, Campbell had a magnificent chance within a quarter of an hour to give them a 1-0 lead. But other than that, we looked much the better side. But we talk about it over and over and over again. It's a thing we talked about many times last season, Conor. A lack of that final end product. It's just so frustrating that it's something we keep talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, on display in the first half, there's been loads of chatter like, can Oxford compete in the Championship? Can they go again? Do they, even as far as some people say, do they actually deserve to be in the Championship? Well, we do because we're here. But on like a pure footballing display in that first half, with just pure football, as you say, that shows that we can compete and we do have the quality to be able to compete and give any team a good game. Yeah, Sheffield United are bottom of the league, but looking at that squad, especially the two names that you just named, Tanganga and Ben Mee, who have been Premier League centre halves, like they've still got a whole depth of quality in that squad, and they just need a rocket up the backside, like Chris Wilder is probably giving them at the moment, and they'll be shooting up that table. The last 4 games that we've played during September, we've seen incremental progress, and it's been probably leading to not just last week, but the half that we've had here and being able to play that football that we know is the typical Oxford way of, getting it on the deck, being aggressive, being direct, and being front-footed. So it's nice to see that there are those signs, but the thing that wins you matches is putting the ball in the back of the net, and we've had this issue now, even at times during the promotion season. So this isn't a new thing in the back end of the promotion season, and we weren't really able to stick the ball in the back of the net. It was just a few magic moments that got us over the line into the playoffs. And again, last season, arguably that there was a few magic moments that got us over the line into safety. So it isn't sustainable being able to score goals through set pieces and through worldies. At some point, it's going to come together, but it's just going to be when we can put together a good piece of attacking play. And whether it be Lancashire, Brannigan, de Kersmacher, Krastev, finding them in the right spaces at the right times, being able to time their runs correctly and find the right balls and put it in the back of the net.
I'm just thinking back, and you're right. The last campaign I can think where we were truly, scoring most opportunities we were creating, or at least scoring a good amount of them, was the penultimate season under Carl Robinson. Of course, his last campaign was that dreadful near relegation season where we couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And like you say, obviously the promotion season under Manning and Buckingham, we had spells of Spiker got 17 goals in that season, but there were spells where we looked like we were struggling. And again, I'm not sure what it is. It's like you say, it's a problem we've had for many, many years now. But it's so frustrating because, like you say, we showed in that first half performance that we can compete with some sides in this division. I mean, obviously the players that Sheffield United had. I mean, the two main names, of course, that jump out on the team sheets. Callum O'Hare and Gustavo Harmer, they're 15
Yeah.
million quid. They're minimum 15 million quid each. They're absolutely insane. Obviously, Harrison Burrows, we know his quality from his time in League One with Peterborough, and he's made a decent step up to the Championship. So we can compete, but it's just, you know, it's all for naught. All this really good players for naught if you're not getting in. I'm not even going to say in the right areas because we were making those chances. I mean, there was a brilliant opportunity where I think it's Brannigan and Krastev combined. Krastev has a really mazy run on the edge of the area, and he tries to lay it off. I think to Shemi Porheta. Porheta blasts it over the bar. I don't know what it is that Krastev is maybe a bit wary of taking the shots, but it does seem as they're at some point that this is a I don't like this phrasing because it's used to often denigrate really intricate passing styles of play, but it looked like at least yesterday we were trying to walk it into the back of the net.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because at times under Robinson, that's also what infuriated us. I'm not sure about you, Sam, trying to walk the ball into the back of the net. I'm not saying that these are the type of players that we need, but I'm thinking back on the last few seasons as well, and I can't think of a time where we've had a player connection that was quite like James Henry and Matty Taylor, as in
Yeah.
they were both on the same wavelength. Taylor always knew where Henry was going to put it, and Henry always knew where Taylor was going to be. That's the type of connection that we need, and I know that it takes time to build. And if we're going to look for something like, not sure if Rowett's going to look for something like that because of the way that Plaheta and Krastev, how they like to cut inside and they want to get past man. But something like that is exactly, I think, what we need, because I think that, as you say, we have the player quality there. It's just forming those final connections and relationships to know when you're on each other's wavelength and where to be and when to be.
I was just thinking, and the last connection I can think of, and obviously it wasn't as prolific as James Henry and Matty Taylor, was Ruben and Sparky. That they always seemed to kind of know where each other were, but obviously the difference there was I think Matty's instincts in front of goal were a lot better than Sparky's.
Yeah.
Obviously Sparky got a lot of goals in his first season with us, but Matty Taylor would score goals that I sometimes hadn't. There was a couple of headers that I'm like, he's definitely getting beaten here in the air, and he managed to to win the duel and knock it in the back of the net. I think what we also need to do is acknowledge the quality. Like we said, it was very much a game of two halves. It was certainly a game where Chris Wilder gave a rocket at the backsides of the Sheffield United players after they'd not been good in that first half, and they came out and produced this display. Much more even, and obviously 0 shots on target from us in that second half. Look, we've got to give a little bit of credit to Sheffield United. They managed the game. Obviously it gets infuriating at times, and there was I think it was 6 minutes of added time. It does infuriate in the moment, but it's smart game management from Sheffield United, and it's they looked like their old selves at points in that second half.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've seen through the local press at BBC Radio Sheffield. O'Hare saying that Wilder said at halftime to them that you're all championship players and you're here for a reason. You're good enough. So whatever he said obviously worked because of the result, and they got up for it. But yeah, I think that they looked like, I don't think that they looked their old selves, but there was just something that changed, or whatever Wilder said to him, that we are here for a reason. We are playing for a Premier League a team that was within touching distance of the Premier League last season. They came out and they were. Did they want it more? I don't think that's fair to say that do you think that's fair to say that they wanted it more? Or is it just that or was it that they were more on it, and then Oxford went into the second half, and they seemed a bit more. They seemed lackluster. They seemed like that they had spelled all their energy out in the first half.
I think it was more that their press was a lot more aggressive. There were just before their goal, I said to the person next to me, they're not allowing us out of our half. Their press is really strong. They're not allowing us to breathe. And obviously it contributes to the goal. Ball is played to Ogbene, and he whips the ball in. Little header off Campbell, and Callum O'Hare not being picked up by Cameron Brannigan or Brian de Kuzmaka in the just around the penalty spot, and knocks it past Jamie Cumming to send the Sheffield United team and the away end absolutely balmy. Obviously, I watched it back a couple of times. It's brilliant by Ogbene. He just about, I think he whips in just as the ball is creaking over the line. He keeps it in play brilliantly. And yeah, it's brilliant awareness from Callum O'Hare. I've watched it back a couple of times thinking, could, Jack Curry gets pulled out of position a little bit. Sam Long is trying to obviously cover for him and is trying to make up by coming back inside. The amount of time that Callum O'Hare's got, not being picked up by de Kuzmaka or Brannigan. Is that just nitpicking, or do we think that goal was, at least to a certain extent, preventable?
I mean, it's not the first time this season we've had issues defensively when there's ball been coming in. I mean, trying to think off the back of my head, at Hull, I know that there was a couple goals, wasn't there, where the defence was not really. They didn't seem like that they were in tandem with one another, or there was any structure. Just trying to think of any other ones that I've seen. I can't really think, but I don't think it's really nitpicking. If it's Birmingham, yeah, that's a point. Yeah, if it's once and then it happens 3 or 4 months later, yeah, you might say, yeah, that's nitpicking. But in 6 games, if we found 3 different games which has happened, I don't really think that's nitpicking. That's a bit of concern. That's a bit of consistency that maybe we need a level head to come back and organise the back line. So I'm not sure how much longer we can hold on to. Maybe when Kieran Brown comes back, everything will be better. We'll have to wait and see what happens, and see what that partnership of, if that partnership with Brown and Hellick can reform again, and see if there can be some structure and some communication in that back line. I did also see that there was a bit of criticism that Brannigan came into for not tracking back enough to cover O'Hare. But
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, what do you think of that? I thought maybe it was a little bit harsh, but I can also see where some of the criticism is coming from.
Yeah, there was periods where Cam was a bit. It comes with Cam's role, isn't it?
Yeah.
In kind of all action midfielder, is that he'll have sprinted halfway up the pitch and then he'll get towards the opposition area. Then when the play switches, he's absolutely knackered and bust all his the energy left in his body to get beyond the halfway line, and then by that point the play's way ahead of him. So I can understand that, but at the same time, I also, this is a point that I kind of want to get your thoughts on, Conor, that was kind of discussed in the stands on Saturday, was about if the emergence and the consistent impressive showings we've seen from Brian de Kuzmaka since he's come in, if that has correlated with Brannigan's, a lack of form for Cameron Brannigan, in the sense that Brian de Kuzmaka has been given a lot of freedom in the attacking third because the creativity he can bring, and it's why Brannigan and Volks worked so well at periods last season, because Volks would sit deep just in front of the back four. Brannigan would be able to do his all action stuff, whereas with de Kuzmaka, they're both trying to be the ball carrier, be the progressive passer, and that leaves neither one of them to really do, to solely focus on the defensive side of the game.
Do you think that the inclusion of de Kuzmaka is restricting Brannigan's game?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's at the minute the evidence is pointing towards yes.
I can see what you mean, because even when I think back to Bristol City and the game before that, there wasn't really much. Like Brannigan was making some really nice passes, but in terms of creativity and what we know that he can unlock, there wasn't the same amount in quantity as there has been before De Kersmacher came into the team. I think that because there was a time in League One, wasn't there, where Brannigan was playing in a more of a holding midfielder role, and I think we're right in saying that he'll do the job because that's the kind of bloke that he is. If he's told to go into right back or left back, he's going to go into play in right back or left back and give it his best. But he doesn't naturally like to play in the 10, and I think that fans, they also have a bit of trepidation about him playing in that 10 role, especially at Championship level. I think that I don't know, because what do you do about that if that becomes a bit of a problem? Can you drop Brannigan? Because I don't really think that you can drop him to make way for De Kersmacher.
The only workaround I can see for that is that we switch to a 4-3-3 and have Volks as the holder, and then that allows Brannigan and De Kersmacher to do their respective things. But what that means is, A, you've got a serious lack of midfield cover in case of an injury or whatever it might be. And that system, though, those three can't play 2 games a week for however often that happens in over the course of a season. But also, you lose out on. It requires all the creativity to, or most of the attacking threat, I should say, to come in the wide areas. And sure, that might allow then De Kersmacher to step up a little bit into kind of a makeshift 10 role. But what Rout's new system has really had in its favour is that Shapehead, Krastev and Prelec, they're constantly kind of rotating amongst themselves. Causing confusion for the opposition defenders. So it's whether kind of the benefit of maybe a Brannigan back to his best with, De Kersmacher also still playing up to his ability means you also lose the fluidity that playing those three, behind a central striker gives you.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Cause if I'm right in thinking, isn't 4-2-3-1 what Rowett has played pretty much all of his managerial career? I'm thinking back to his Millwall team and then his Derby team as well. I'm not really interested in his Stoke side because that was a calamity.
Yeah, with obviously the odd exception of obviously from what we've seen with playing 3 at the backs or 5 at the backs, when it comes to a 4, he mostly, like you say, prefers a 2-3-1.
Yeah, but that's an interesting point. I'll have to think more about that after we finish today on whether De Kersmacher is hindering Brannigan's game, because, as you say, because of the quality, because he is such a step up in quality to what we've had in the centre of midfield.
Give us your thoughts on that, viewers. We really like to see your feedback and your opinions. What your thoughts on, is Brian De Kersmacher limiting what Cameron Brannigan is able to do in the Championship? Obviously, we've only seen very limited evidence of this, but just kind of your first thoughts on this. Obviously, as we mentioned, Conor, 2 games in a week. First, we've got the trip to Loftus Road to play Queen's Park Rangers. In their last 5 matches, they have won 3, drawn 1, and of course their one loss in those 5 games was the 7-1 battering at the hands of Coventry. So they've rebounded pretty well from that humiliation. A 1-0 draw against Sheffield Wednesday last time out. Obviously, I think we've mentioned in the past, QPR have got an insane attacking lineup of players. Obviously Richard Coney up top, Sato, Chair, Karamaka Dembele, Vale. They've got some simply ridiculous players. What's kind of your assessment of how QPR have started the campaign?
Well, I think that you can say that their campaign really started after that 7-0 battering, because they lost in the opening weekend to Watford and they got hammered by Coventry, which was probably the best thing for them. And they've, not that they have taken off a little bit, scoring 8 in the past 4 games. So what's that? 2 a game. At Loftus Road, they have a very strong record there anyway. And towards the back end of last season, albeit under Marty Cifuentes, they were very, very good at home. As you say, the attacking threat is, when you look on paper, it's one of the best in the league. I think they got one of the biggest steals of the season in Kone, and him being a Wigan man, he's probably 99% odds on to score against Oxford on Wednesday. Unfortunately, that's just the way it happens. And their defense, I think that they've really sorted themselves out. We keep going back to that 7-1 defeat, but that was probably the best thing for them and sorting themselves out. They've gone shooting up the table as well. They're up to, I think, 10th, I believe, at the moment. Just trying to get the table up in front of me.
9th at the minute.
9th, 10th, yeah. So
they're level on points with Charlton and West Brom.
Yeah, and going to Loftus Road, like, it's never easy. We've both been there. How enclosed it is, how over the top you are, it can actually be quite intimidating. So I don't think it's not going to be an easy game. Like last season, we thought, okay, this is an opportunity to get some points, but in my mind, I'm more looking at Watford, as mental as that sounds, when they won at the weekend, thinking that might be a place to get points. But a lot of fans, I think, coming into especially these blocks of games over October and November, I think they thought after we got these first 6 out of the way, especially in September, we thought, okay, this is where we can actually start firing. But it turns out that this is going to be another tough game.
Yeah. And like you mentioned, Watford on Saturday, a trip to Vicarage Road. From their last 5, they have drawn 2, lost 2, and their most recent game yesterday, of course, it was a 2-1 win against Hull to sort of stop the slide. They play Portsmouth on Wednesday night. And obviously there's a bit of a heat into that game after what happened at Vicarage Road last year. So obviously, it could be 2 wins in 5, or it could be 3 losses in 5. Talk to us about Watford's start to the campaign, because obviously, it's always madness at Vicarage Road. There's, I think there was talk this week of potentially that they might be in the search for another new manager, with some comments that he'd made about the ownership.
Yeah, that's not surprising. Watford changed manager at least once by this time in the season. I think that a lot of people had Watford to maybe struggle this season, especially, as you say, with the ownership and the manager. Not a lot of people heard about the manager that came into Watford. I think he's been in South America and in Spain a lot of his time, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong. However, a lot of Watford's goals, they seem to be, I think that they seem quite set piecey, but someone can say otherwise. They're very, very dangerous from set pieces. Loser in the centre of midfield, I think that he's their standout player this season. Imran Kunda as well. He's a big, powerful bloke to look out for up front, and I'm sure that he's going to give Hellick, and if it's Long or Davies at the back, he's going to give them a run for their money. But in defensive positions over the past couple of games, they haven't been great, losing 1-0 at Blackburn and at Millwall, but generally speaking, they've been okay throughout the season. I think it's going to be another tough one, but if I'm looking at it over these next 2 games, I'm looking at Watford thinking there's more of an opportunity, to get some points on the board. They haven't exactly been finding the back of the net that easily either, but also defensively they have been pretty solid compared to a lot of the teams around them this season.
Yeah. We mentioned a little bit about the squad earlier, just to kind of round the episode out. Obviously midweek games are back, so looking at our squad, we mentioned about kind of the lack of midfield cover that we've really got at our football club. Do you think we've got the squad to be able to properly cope with these games? Because obviously, as we saw with with Saturday, Rout is, now he's got the option and performances have worked out. He'll want to try and keep the same sort of lineup, but with games in a short amount of time. Obviously, we've got the international break just after it, so the lads will have a nice rest after Watford. But the schedule doesn't ease up after the international break.
In midfield and out wide, I think I think we could expect some. I would expect some changes anyway on Wednesday. Sorry, but I think if we got an injury in centre half position, then I think that there would be a little bit of panic in it. That's where we seem to have less cover at the moment. Whilst Kieran Brown is still out, yeah, he's coming back. But say if there was, God forbid, a Helek injury, I'd be panicking. To be honest, going into the game on Wednesday, if I was shooting in the dark, I would probably say that Player would go out and think Mills would go in. I think possibly even Harris might start in favour of Lancashire.
Which one?
That's true, actually, yeah. Harris will start up top. Mark Harris will start up top, and I wouldn't be surprised, as you say, if Luke Harris comes in, if both Harrises start. That's just for me anyway. I also wouldn't be surprised if maybe Greg Lee comes in from the start on Wednesday. I personally think that he deserves it. Display that he gave at Bristol City, and when he came on against Sheffield United, he actually looked like an attacking threat, looked like our only attacking threat in the second half. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some changes made there, but definitely we're going to see a bit of rotation over the next 2 games.
It'll be interesting to obviously. I'm just going to very quickly bring up the team sheet from yesterday's game again, just to kind of give us an idea of what we're working with. Because one man that is obviously missing from that is our only real other midfielder in Louis Sibley. So it'll be interesting to kind of see if Sibley is utilised to keep men fresh for each game, or if because he's not been in the match squad for at least the last 2. So I wonder if. I don't know if there's an injury there or if Rout's gone, actually, he's not quite what I'm looking for in a midfielder. And I wonder if he's regretting not picking another one up in the window. Any final bits and pieces to add in for the preview for those upcoming next games, Conor?
They're going to be tough. If you offered me 1 loss and 1 win, I would absolutely take that at this moment in time. I wouldn't even take 2 draws. If there's a loss and a win somewhere, I would be very, very happy. 2 trips to London, which, 2 away games in a row isn't exactly favourable, but the short distances that they are, I think that we have to try and make that work to our advantage. So in terms of the way the schedule's fallen, that works slightly on our side, but I think they're going to be another 2 games where it's going to be there's going to be patchy periods in both games. It's just what it's been like in the Championship for the past season and a bit. So let's go in hopeful, and if we can get at least 3 points out of 1, I think that every Oxford fan would snap your hand off for that at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, folks, as we mentioned a couple of times, international break is after this game, so or after this week of games, I should say. So we're having discussions about another special international break episode for you, folks. But keep an eye on the channel, and you will see what we come up with. But as Conor said, let's just hope for 3 points, hopefully in the game just before, in Watford, because at least we've then got a week and a half to sit on that 3 points as opposed to sitting on a loss. Thanks so much, folks, for watching this week's episode of Walk in the London Road. As I mentioned at the start of the episode, if you could please like, comment and subscribe, really helps out the channel on YouTube. Of course, you can find us on YouTube and Spotify. Give us your thoughts on any of the topics we've talked about in this week's episode, and we'll see you next week.